banks started moving out into other areas of expertise. Banks now do mortgages, banks do auto leasing, banks do investments, things that were not considered traditional banking. I was a junior officer at a small bank in Phoenix. My career track, been working in the trust department for First National of Chicago for 10 years, and then I moved to Arizona.
Or did it allow you to expand the scope of your career?
Allowed me to put my career in a whole different perspective in terms of what my ceiling was going to be. That I served as president.
Mr. Richard Holmes, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit more about you and your involvement with Urban Financial Services Coalition.
My involvement with Urban Financial Services Coalition started back in 1984. I attended my first conference in 1985 in San Francisco, and that's when I walked into the room and I saw 300 to 400 African American professionals in a setting, and it wasn't just their presence. The workshops, the content of the workshops were all things that were very relevant, and I found myself taking more notes than I probably would have taken otherwise, but just to be in the presence of that many people that were in senior level roles within the within the banking industry. And what it showed me was that the possibilities were limitless in terms of being a person of color in that industry. Prior to that, I was a junior officer at a small bank in Phoenix, and my career track was okay. I'd been working in the trust department for First National of Chicago for 10 years, and then I moved to Arizona. But then in around the fourth year was when I got exposed to being part of UFSC, and saw that there were senior vice presidents, there were vice presidents, there were bank presidents, and it just allowed me to put my career in a whole different perspective in terms of what my ceiling was going to be.
Was that the opening for you to think of beyond, or did it allow you to expand the scope of your career? You would say that? Just being able to see success within that room allowed you to think maybe I can be one of them?
Oh, most definitely.
Can you expand on that a little bit? What was the emotional feeling that because you were saying that you were taking notes and you must have been extremely engaged?
I was very engaged. There were some very powerful speakers. Most of the speakers that were on the panels were senior level executives, and they were telling their stories about how they got to be where they were. And listening to their stories, which were not that much different than mine. They didn't get any special favor, didn't get any special privileges. It was just hard work, determination, being a part of an organization that would encourage you to grow and develop in a safe space. And I think that was, the light came on in my head that the possibilities were almost limitless.
That's true. And you served as a president as
Yes,
well.
I did.
And I did see you speak in the panel as well. You were sharing a little bit of your experience as a president, what you've implemented while you were a president. Talk to me a little bit about from walking into that room and seeing what was being discussed and your journey into the presidency.
Some of my biggest role models within this organization were some of the other past presidents who are no longer with us, unfortunately. I look at people like Bob Samuels, Herb Whiteman, Nat Harris, and Lloyd Griffin. And the thing I was impressed about them the most was they were so very eloquent and knew how to command a room. But they were also very good at what they did professionally. And they all got to, over time, they all got to be very, very close friends of mine. And in talking to them and listening to them and just them sharing their experiences with me, again, it showed me that there's a path for me that was bigger than the one that I thought.
Interesting. One of the things you implemented as a president was technology, even the initiation of the organization's website.
Yes.
Tell me the background of yours, or even the reason for that initiation. Now we see the website; it's implemented not only across the nation, but even in local chapters as well.
Right.
So that was part of your initiative.
Yeah, initially, and this was, I would say, in the mid '90s, when a lot of corporations, a lot of organizations were shifting their focus more toward technology and delivering things electronically. And when we were preparing for our board meetings, we would ask all the committee chairs to submit their reports in writing, and sometimes we would have a board book that would be maybe 2 to 3 inches thick. And it got to be a cumbersome process because you've got 30, 40 people attending a board meeting and you've got to reproduce all this paper. So we, under my administration, I put out a mandate to have all the committee chairs submit their reports electronically. And at the same time, we had, working with Bank of America, which was my employer at the time, they offered to help us develop the website. So it was the resources of Bank of America and their technology group that were very instrumental in us developing that website, and it was unveiled up in San Francisco the year after I left the presidency. It took them a while to get it developed, but once they got it developed, then it was the first iteration of a website for NAUB/UFSC that we started there, and then it just went on from there.
Beautiful. Now you are in the financial services industry. Or have you retired? Or
No,
are you still,
I've been
still
retired for 7 years.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Well, tell me a little bit more about your career there. We can talk about your career, what got you motivated to be a wealth manager, and all that.
I was working at the First National Bank in Chicago. My first job at First National of Chicago was in the mailroom, of all places. And then the story gets a little interesting because I was drafted into the military in 1971. Went to the military, went to intelligence school, then served in Vietnam for a couple of years. And when I came back to the bank, they didn't put me back in the mailroom. They put me into the trust department. I had an accounting background, and they were staffing their tax department in the trust department. So I went into work in trust tax, and I stayed in the tax department at First Chicago for about 10 years. And then I decided to move to Arizona, only because I was in Arizona as a part of my military experience, and I just wanted to move back there to live and relocate out of Chicago. So I went to work for a bank in Phoenix. It was Valley National Bank at the time, which is now part of Chase. Mm-hmm. And I was a trust tax officer there for a couple of years, and then I moved over to another bank where I was recruited by my mentor, Alex Johnson. And I worked in trust tax for a few years, and then I became the manager of the tax department there. And then I went into trust administration and wealth management. And I stayed there, stayed with Bank of America, spent 10 years in California. And then after my 10 years in California, and this is really where the story gets interesting, is that during the year that I served as president, we had our national conference in Detroit. And Comerica Bank was our title sponsor. And then shortly after my presidency, Comerica Bank started recruiting me to come work for them. And in 2000, I went to work for Comerica Bank in Phoenix, and I finished out my career with Comerica. So it was a direct result of my exposure through NAUB that landed me that position at Comerica.
NAUB being the previous name of Urban Financial Services Coalition, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. That is very interesting because we did talk about how this organization allows people to get exposure.
Yes.
From that exposure, opportunities will spring, and in your case, that is what got you into a better opportunity that you landed, and you ended your career with that organization.
Right, and a number of my colleagues that are part of UFSC now, they saw significant career advancement as a result of their exposure through NAUB/UFSC.
So people need to be encouraged to be part of this organization.
Yeah,
and
I would say so, yes.
If it hits your bottom line and in your pockets, I think that would be enough encouragement for us to consider it.
Yeah,
least.
because apparently when you're involved and you're engaged with UFSC, you have no idea who's watching. And it used to be that when we had our national conferences where we had like 500,000-600,000 people there, a lot of the banks would send recruiters to our conferences because they knew that was the largest assemblage of minority talent in any one spot in the country.
And that was in Chicago, correct?
The first one, no, the one I got recruited for at Comerica, that was in Detroit.
Detroit, oh wow.
Yeah.
Throughout your career, what changes have you seen in the financial services industry, specifically as it relates to creating opportunity or encouraging organizations such as Urban Financial Services Coalition? Do you think the financial industry as a whole is receptive to the benefit and the impact that organization as such could lead or could leave with their home base of the organization?
It's not as good as or as effective as it once was. A lot of that is the byproduct of industry consolidation. A lot of it is because of the increased use of technology within the industry, and banking is just not done the way it was in the past. And as a result, we don't get the kind of exposure that we used to get heretofore because, well, one thing is that some of the larger banks, and I won't name them, but some of the, I guess the 5 largest banks created their own affinity groups within their banks. They called them diversity networks, they called them several other things, but they would have, like, within Bank of America, we had a black officers network within the bank, which was just the black officers from Bank of America. Some of the other banks had something similar, they called them different things. But those affinity groups were, in my view, competing with what we were doing. And as a result, some of the larger banks, they either withdrew or diminished their level of support for UFSC because they had created their own internal affinity networks.
How do you see the current president, Theodore Watson, and local chapter presidents combat that competition?
I think it's all about relationships. I just met Theodis today. This is the first time we've ever met. I saw him on a Zoom call a couple of weeks ago, but I love his energy. I love his spirit. I think he's going to do a fantastic job. But banking is still about relationships. It's being able to pick up the phone and call someone when you need something. It's being able to run something by someone when you're not quite sure about that. I think Theodis is going to do a great job as our president, and he has my full support in whatever I can do to help him succeed. Because at the end of the day, if he wins, we win. And that's been the hallmark of UFSC through the years I've been there, is that we've always tried to support and uplift one another.
So you would encourage him to foster and pay attention more on the relationships side of it, which kind of relates to his initiative that includes partnerships.
Right.
So just fostering more in that direction.
Yeah, it's become a little more difficult now due to the industry consolidation, because a lot of the, particularly with the larger banks, the decision makers, if they're not in your local market, it's hard to get access to them. For example, I think Bank of America's headquarters is in Charlotte now. Wells Fargo's in San Francisco. And if you're not part of one of those local chapters and you have access to senior management at those institutions, sometimes you have to work through regional managers or someone not quite at that level who has decision-making authority. I think one of the things that helped us in the early years was having the relationships with the senior executives at the local banks who supported our organization. They saw what we were doing, they believed in what we were doing, and they had the ability to write a check. Now, because a lot of that function has been centralized, it's more difficult for someone in a market where that institution doesn't have a headquarters or a presence with a decision maker to have that kind of access.
I see. Well, at least you're laying out the challenges and where they come from.
Right.
So I guess it's definitely the job of the president and local chapter presidents to be able to combat it in a way where they bring the value. And one of the things you talked about when you were sitting on the panel was people too, right?
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit more about that.
One of the reasons I've stayed in this organization and stayed involved with this organization as long as I have is the people. The relationships that I've developed over the years have lasted a lifetime. Some of the people that I've developed friendships with, I still communicate with, even though I've been retired. But we're like a big family.
It's more of a community.
Yeah.
A lifetime community.
It is. I've had the opportunity to watch some of my colleagues watch their kids grow up. They've watched my children grow up. Some people we spend holidays together, and it's just things that we do away from the banks that really help to solidify those relationships.
What's your hope for the next 25, 50 years to come? Ideally, where would you want to see this go?
I would love to see a UFSC enhance its national platform and develop relationships with some of the larger financial institutions, but at the same time, be a resource to small businesses, to community banks, and in terms of growth of the organization, in terms of the membership, reach out to people beyond the banking industry. Every company in this world, or I should say every company in this country, has to have a finance person. It can be an insurance company, it can be an investment company, it can be a real estate company, even in healthcare or automotive sales. Every company has finance people. Those finance people could be a part of this organization, and I think those finance people could benefit from being a part of this organization. That was part of the catalyst behind changing the name from NAUB to UFSC, because we wanted to have an organization that encompassed all financial services. And at the same time, initially banks were banks, but then banks started moving out into other areas of expertise. Banks now do mortgages, banks do auto leasing, banks do investments, things that were not considered traditional banking, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. That makes sense. I think you're absolutely right. Well, it's a pleasure to have you today here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here. I've seen people today that I haven't seen in decades.
Yes, no, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
because what happened as the industry consolidated in the 90s, a lot of our members left the industry just because of the way the consolidation affected them, particularly people in some of the markets where they didn't have a headquarters presence, and a lot of positions were eliminated. But then a lot of people just decided that they saw where the industry was going and just didn't want to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm. It's good to see these people here in these rooms doing well. Since you last saw them, I'm sure.
It is. People like Ann and Demita and Tony Codrington, and he's really Tony's a special friend because Tony's a visionary. He would come to the meetings, and he was back in the 1980s. He was stressing to us the importance of us embracing technology. He wound up working at IBM. He was a banker per se, but he was an IT guy at a bank. So he wasn't really a banker. He was an IT person, and he went on to IBM. But he just kept hammering on. We need to embrace the technology. Here's where it's going, and most of his predictions turned out to be true.
It makes sense. Just like how finance touches every industry and every business, technology does as well.
Yes.
It's so important. It's very important to consolidate those two and at least merge them in a way where they just make sense for a particular organization. Do you serve small businesses by any chance, or small business owners? Or even when you manage?
Well, when I was at Comerica, Comerica was one of the largest small business lenders in the country. And I was able to refer some clients over to Comerica and able to get them some funding for their businesses.
I see. Any tips you can give small businesses, if any at all, from your observation?
Yes. The biggest thing I would say is keep good records.
Financial records?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even any record. Just
but mainly financial records. When you come in and you want to talk about a small business loan, they want to look at your financial history.
True.
And if it's organized, it's well done, and then the likelihood that you'll be able to succeed with that is better than it would be if you come in with a shopping bag full of receipts.
Right. Well.
And unfortunately, not just small businesses, but small and medium-sized businesses, the business owners are more focused on their business, their area of expertise, than they are on actually handling the business part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a time when I used to teach accounting for small businesses at Western International University in Phoenix, and it was business owners, and I said, look, these are the basics. These are the things you need to do for your accountant, for your tax person, and more importantly, if you ever want to go to a bank to get a loan, you've got to have complete, accurate, readable financial statements.
Mm-hmm. That's a very solid point.
Yeah.
We can end it there. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate it.